The first time Adiz saw the sand, she did not think much of it. It was a Tuesday morning in Mirioma village, the kind of morning where the cold harmattan breeze carries the smell of dust, smoke, and faraway secrets. The sun had not yet climbed the sky. Only a faint orange line rested on the horizon like a lazy promise. Adiz stood at the backyard, tying her wrapper tighter as she soaked her husband's clothes in a blue plastic bowl. She hummed an old folk song her mother used to sing. Something about a woman who waited for her husband every night, but never knew where he went until it was too late. She did not remember the lyrics well, but the melody floated softly, clinging to the morning air. She dipped her hand into the back pocket of her husband's work trousers. Her hand came out coated with sand. Red sand. Not the regular village soil that was brown and soft. No, this one was deeper, richer, the color of dry blood, or something older. It crumbled slowly between her fingers, sticking to her palm, refusing to fall. Adiz frowned. Sand quoi? Inside office cloth, she murmured aloud. Her husband, Chitty, was an office worker in a small accounting firm in the neighboring town. A gentle man, soft-spoken, neat to the point of obsession. The kind of man who ironed even his underwear and counted his steps so his shoes wouldn't get dusty. But lately, strange things had started happening. He came home late almost every night, long after the chickens had stopped moving and only crickets remained awake. His voice had grown faint, like someone speaking from inside a tunnel. His smell had changed too. Not bad, not good, just different. Cold, earthy, like he had walked through a place no living man should walk through. And now sand. She poured the rest of the sand out of the pocket, but more kept coming. It was as if the pocket was connected to a hidden ground somewhere, and her hand had dipped into that soil instead. A little shiver passed through her. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe today he walked through a dusty path. Maybe he went somewhere new. Maybe. Chinique me, she whispered as she sniffed her fingers. The sand had a smell. A faint, metallic smell. Like old iron or dried tears. When Chitty woke up that morning, Adiz had already cleaned the compound and prepared his tea. She placed the steaming cup on the wooden table, waiting for him to come out of the bedroom. He finally stepped out. Adiz paused. Her husband looked pale. Not normal pale, but the kind of pale that makes you step back without knowing why. His eyes looked dull, his skin slightly ashy, and his clothes clung to him loosely as though he had lost weight without telling her. He smiled weakly. Good morning, Ada. Good morning, she whispered, her eyes studying him. She wanted to ask him about the sand, but something tightened inside her chest. Something kept her mouth shut. Something told her to observe first. He sipped the tea slowly, as if the cup were too heavy for his hand. Then he glanced at the time. I should be going. She watched him wear the same trousers she had washed, the same trousers whose pocket had been filled with red sand only the day before. Before she could say anything, he walked out of the house with slow, dragging steps. Almost like he was tired. Almost like his feet were pulling him towards somewhere they recognized. The day passed slowly, and Adiz could not shake the memory of that sand. She kept remembering how her hand had sunk into it like it belonged somewhere else. She kept remembering the smell, the texture, the stubbornness of it in her palm. Her neighbor, Mama Ifioma, noticed her distracted look when they met at the stream. Adiz, is everything all right? You look like somebody pursued by her own shadow. Adiz forced a small smile. I am fine, Mama. But she wasn't. Her heart kept beating faster every time she remembered that sand. It didn't feel ordinary. It didn't feel explainable. It felt like something that followed a man home even when the man didn't want to bring it. By evening, she sat outside, waiting for Chitty. Children played down the dusty road, chasing one another with laughter that echoed through the warm night. Women fried akara. Men returned from their farms. Candles and lanterns flickered inside small shops. But her husband didn't come home. Hours passed. 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Her chest tightened. When he finally appeared, the street had grown quiet. He walked slowly, shoulders bent, his trousers dusty from the ankle to the knee. Chitty, she called, rushing to him. Where have you been? He didn't answer. He only looked at her, eyes hollow, expression unreadable, then brushed past her into the house like someone returning from a long journey. A very long journey. Adiz stood there, breath held, fear crawling down her spine. But nothing prepared her for what she saw the next morning. Not just sand, but the exact same red sand she had washed off yesterday. Fresh, damp, and this time more of it. So much that it spilled from the pocket before she even touched it. Adi's hands trembled violently. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and as she felt the cold breeze whisper past her ear, she knew, deep inside, that whatever her husband was bringing home every night did not belong to the world of the living. That night, Adiz could not sleep. It wasn't for lack of trying. She lay beside her husband on their bamboo bed, staring at the ceiling, counting the faint cracks on the wooden boards, listening to the whisper of the wind outside. But her body refused to relax. Her spirit was restless. Her ears stayed alert like a hunter waiting for the cry of a trapped animal. Her heart beat so loudly she wondered if her husband could hear it. Chitty lay beside her, unnaturally still. No soft snore, no gentle breathing, just stillness. Silence so thick that Adiz kept glancing at him in the darkness to be sure he was even alive. Once, just once, she reached out a trembling hand to touch his arm. Cold, cold like someone who slept without a soul. She withdrew her hand sharply, pressing her fingers to her chest. Chinik Baiko, she whispered. The next morning felt worse. The cock crowed, but the sound seemed distant. The village woke, but Adiz felt detached from everything, like she was watching life through a thin sheet of glass. She stood in the compound, sweeping absent-mindedly when Chitty came out, dressed for work. He didn't look at her. He didn't greet her. He simply walked past with the same dragging steps, like someone carrying a weight no one else could see. Chitty, Adiz called softly. He paused, just paused. Slowly he turned his head. His eyes were dull and far away. Where do you go every morning? Adiz asked in a small voice. He blinked. Once. Twice. I go to work, he said quietly. But Adiz felt it. The lie. The emptiness behind the words. The chill in his voice. The faint smell of something cold and old, like earth turned over after decades. She swallowed and looked down at his shoes. Red dust. Fresh. So fresh it looked as though he had walked through a grave. By midday, Adiz felt she needed answers. Any answers. Her mind was spinning. Her body felt weak. She had washed her husband's clothes again, and this time the red sand formed a small heap at her feet. Her neighbor Mama Ifioma found her staring at the pile, looking shaken. Adiz, why are you staring at sand like that? She asked half-jokingly. Adiz didn't answer immediately. Fear gripped her tongue like a hand. Finally, she whispered, these are from Chitty's trousers. Mama Ifioma blinked. Trousers how? Did he go to construction site? Adiz shook her head. No. This sand, it is always the same. Every day, even after washing. Mama Ifioma bent down to touch it, but withdrew sharply. This one looks like the red sand from behind the old cemetery. Adiz's heart dropped. Cemetery. The word felt like thunder in her ears. Before she could speak, Mama Ifioma waved her hand. Omo, don't worry yourself too much. Maybe he passes behind there. Maybe road work is happening. Maybe. But her voice grew faint as she saw Adiz's trembling hands. Adiz, you are shaking. Adiz stepped back, hugging her body. Something is wrong, she whispered. I don't know what it is, but something is wrong with my husband. Mama Ifioma opened her mouth, closed it again, then slowly touched Adiz's shoulder. If something is troubling you, pray. But Adiz knew prayer alone couldn't chase away what she was beginning to suspect. That evening, the world felt strange. The air heavy, the sky dull. Even the goats bleated differently, their sounds echoing against the mud walls as if bouncing off unseen shadows. Adiz cooked dinner, yam porridge with scent leaf, but she noticed something odd. Chitty didn't come home hungry. In fact, he didn't even look at the food. He simply sat on the wooden stool in the corner of the room, head down, fingers intertwined, as if holding onto something invisible. Adiz approached him slowly. Chitty, she whispered. Have you eaten today? No answer. Are you sick? He didn't move. Her voice began to shake. Do you hear me? Still nothing. Just that strange, heavy silence. Adiz took a step back, fear creeping into her throat like smoke. Then, he lifted his head, very slowly. His eyes met hers. Empty, dark, cold. Leave the light on tonight, he murmured. Adiz swallowed hard. Why? He blinked slowly. Because darkness invites things. A shiver stabbed down her back. Before she could ask anything else, he stood and walked into the bedroom, leaving Adiz standing there, breath frozen, heart pounding. Later that night, long after she thought Chitty was asleep, Adiz sat on the edge of the bed, thinking. Then she heard it. Movement. Not from inside, but from outside the house. Soft footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Moving across the compound. Her heart jumped into her throat. She rushed to the window and pushed the curtain aside just a little, enough to peek. Her breath caught. There, outside, stood Chitty. Barefoot. Wearing the same clothes he had worn all day. Moving toward the village path behind the house. The path that led only two places. The stream and the cemetery. Adiz pressed her hand to her mouth to silence her scream. Her husband was walking like someone drawn by a string. Like someone returning to a place that called his name. When he reached the palm tree at the junction, he paused, turned his head slowly, as though sensing he was being watched, but Adiz ducked before he could look her way. Her entire body shook violently. When she raised her head again, he was gone, disappeared into the night, vanished into the darkness like he belonged there. Adiz couldn't breathe. Her stomach twisted. Her hands trembled. Her heart beat so fast she felt it in her ears. Then a thought hit her with the force of lightning. If Chitty left the house, then who was sleeping on the bed minutes ago? Everything in her went cold. Her knees weakened. She stared at the open bedroom door, her breath locked inside her throat. Slowly, very slowly, she stepped toward the room. The lantern flickered. The air felt thick. She pushed the door open fully. The bed was empty. Completely empty. Cold. Untouched. And that was when she realized. Her husband had never been asleep. He was never resting beside her. She had been lying next to emptiness. Or worse, she had been lying next to something pretending to be him. Adiz stumbled backwards, clutched her chest, and whispered, "This thing living with me is not my husband." She collapsed to her knees, shaking uncontrollably. And outside, far in the distance, carried lightly on the night wind, she heard the faint sound of sand shifting, like someone digging, or lying down, or returning home to where he now belonged. Adiz did not sleep at all. How could she? Her husband? No. The thing that wore her husband's face had walked out of the house, like a shadow returning to its master. And now the night felt too large, too quiet, too watchful. She sat on the cold floor of the bedroom, hugging her knees, rocking back and forth like a frightened child. The lantern on the table flickered weakly, throwing long, trembling shadows across the mud walls. Every rustle of the trees outside made her flinch. Every distant dog bark made her heart jump. She felt as if the darkness itself was holding its breath, waiting. Waiting for what? She did not know. All she knew was that something had changed. Something deep. Something dangerous. Her husband was no longer the man who came home with laughter in his eyes and dust-free shoes. No. Chitty had become a mystery wrapped in silence and coated with red sand. Near midnight, Adiz gathered enough courage to peek through the window again. The air outside was still. The moon hid behind thick clouds, casting the whole village into a gray darkness that felt almost heavy. "God, protect me," she whispered. From somewhere far away came the soft whistle of a night bird. She strained her ears. No footsteps. No movement. No sign of Chitty. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from the edge of the compound. She stepped back and let the curtain fall. The room felt suffocating. Finally, exhaustion dragged her into a restless sleep on the floor. Chitty returned at dawn. Adiz woke to the sound of the gate creaking. She rushed to the window, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. There he was, walking back into the compound, barefoot, his clothes soaked in dew, his trousers coated with fresh red sand, thicker than ever. But the most terrifying thing was his posture. He wasn't walking upright like a normal man. He walked with his head bowed forward, his shoulders hunched, his arms hanging loosely, like a puppet whose strings were being lazily pulled. Adiz's breath caught. He walked past the kitchen, past the yam barn, straight into the backyard. And then, he stopped, right where the early morning light touched the earth. Slowly, he bent down and brushed sand off his trousers. Not ordinary sand. Red sand. Sand that belonged to no path in Mirioma village. Sand that clung to him like grief. Adiz pressed her body against the wall, eyes wide, hands shaking. She watched him walk into the house and quietly enter the bathroom. The bathroom door closed. The sound of water splashing followed. Adiz ran outside, to the exact spot where he had stood. Her heart dropped to her stomach. There, on the ground, were footprints. Deep, sinking into the soil as though the person who made them was carrying the weight of the earth on his shoulders. Adiz crouched and touched one of the prints. Her fingers trembled. The footprint was cold. Too cold. Unnaturally cold. She jerked her hand back. "Chikwana am," she whispered. "What is happening?" When Chitty stepped out of the bathroom minutes later, he looked normal again. Clean. Calm. Human. But Adiz now knew better. "Good morning," he said, voice soft. Adiz stared at him, unable to speak. He smiled faintly. "How was your night?" She blinked. "My night?" "Yes," he repeated, tilting his head slightly. "Did you sleep well?" Her throat tightened. He was asking as if he had been there, as if he had slept beside her, as if he had not wandered into the darkness like a spirit without rest. "Why, yes," she lied. "Good," he said, adjusting his shirt. Then he looked at her properly for the first time that morning. His eyes were dim, but somewhere in that dimness, she saw something else. Sadness, loneliness, regret, but above all, a hollow emptiness that didn't belong to a living man. By midday, Adiz made a decision. She needed help. She walked to the house of Neka, the oldest woman in the village, wise, sharp-tongued, and known for noticing things others ignored. Neka lived at the far end of the village, beside a tall udala tree that never stopped dropping fruit. When Adiz arrived, the old woman was sitting on a wooden stool, slicing bitter leaf. "Neka," Adiz greeted, kneeling slightly. The old woman looked up, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Adiz," she said slowly, "you look as if you've seen a spirit." Adiz hesitated. What if Neka laughed? What if she said it was all in her head? What if? "Talk before your heart bursts," Neka said impatiently. So Adiz talked. She told her everything. The nights, the sand, the cold footprints, the strange behavior, the silent meals, the lonely eyes, the dragging steps, the return at dawn. When she finished, her whole body was shaking. Neka didn't blink. She didn't interrupt. She didn't laugh. She only asked one question. "This red sand, did it ever come off easily?" Adiz shook her head. "No. It sticks to the cloth. It sticks to my hand. It smells strange." Neka exhaled long and slow. "Describe the sand." Adiz swallowed. "Deep red. Almost like blood." The old woman sighed and dropped her bitter leaf. "Adiz," she whispered, "you may not like what you're about to hear." Adiz's heart skipped. There are only 2 places in this entire region where red sand like that exists. Adiz leaned forward, hands trembling. "Where?" Neka held her gaze. Eyes sharp, voice low. "One is Ubani Hill. The other," she said, her voice turning slightly hoarse, "is the old cemetery behind the hill." Adiz froze. Her lips parted as her breath caught in her throat. She stared at Neka with a growing terror. "No," she whispered. "No, it can't be." The old woman placed a firm hand on Adiz's shoulder. "How long has your husband been behaving this way?" Adiz's voice broke. "A few weeks." Neka nodded slowly. "Then you must prepare yourself," she murmured. "For what?" Adiz asked, voice quivering. Neka looked into the distance, her expression heavy with knowing. "For the truth," she said. "The kind of truth that does not walk in daylight. The kind of truth that follows a person home. The kind of truth that leaves footprints no living man should leave." She paused. "Adiz," she said quietly, "what if the man you think you're living with is not the man who left home months ago?" Adiz's entire body went numb. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. She gasped, shaking her head violently. "No, Chitty is alive. He talks. He eats." Neka shook her head slowly. "A spirit can talk. A spirit can wear a man's face. A spirit can return to a house it loved. But it always leaves a sign." She looked at Adiz with eyes full of sorrow. "And in your case, the sign is the sand." Adiz felt her knees weaken. Her breath shortened. Her lips trembled. She whispered, "What are you saying?" Neka took a long breath and replied, "I am saying your husband may have died." Adiz's world spun. "Died where?" she choked out. Neka looked at her with deep pity. "Where do you think?" she whispered. "The cemetery whose sand he carries home every night." Adiz staggered back. Her chest tightened. Her heartbeat raced. "No, no, no. Chitty is alive. He is alive." But even as she said the words, she remembered something. Something small but horrible. Chitty's body temperature. Cold. Always cold. Like earth. Like soil. Like death. Neka reached for Adiz's hand gently. "Listen to me, Adiz." If I am wrong, then nothing will happen. But if I am right. Adiz looked up with watery eyes. You must never, ever, follow him at night. Adiz shook her head. Why not? Neka's eyes darkened. Because the path he walks is not meant for the living. A strong wind blew then, shaking the leaves of the Udala tree. The air grew thick, and Adiz felt something shift, something watching, listening. And far, far away, she heard it again. That faint, unmistakable sound. Sand shifting, like a body turning in its grave. The day after Adiz visited Neka, the whole world around her felt different. The wind seemed to move slower. Birds refused to fly near her compound. Even the sun looked weaker, as if afraid to shine too brightly on her home. She swept the compound mechanically, her mind dark and crowded. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw two images. Chitty walking into the darkness, and Neka's face when she said, "Your husband may have died." The words wouldn't leave her. They clung to her like the red sand clung to Chitty's trousers. By evening, Adiz felt something inside her break into two pieces. Fear on one side, courage on the other. She knew she had to confirm the truth, even if it destroyed her. That night, Adiz stayed awake, waiting. She sat in the living room with a kerosene lantern flickering beside her. Her palms were sweaty, her lips dry, her heart beating too fast. Chitty slept on the bed, still, stiff, unnaturally silent. She watched the clock. 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Every minute felt like a rope tightening around her throat. Then, sometime after midnight, he moved. Not like a normal person turning in sleep. Not like someone uncomfortable, but like someone snapping awake from a command. His eyes didn't open. His breathing didn't change. He simply rose from the bed, slowly, gradually, like something was pulling him up by invisible strings. Adiz's breath caught. Chitty turned toward the door and walked out. But he didn't open the door. The door opened by itself, creaking as if pushed by a cold breeze. He stepped outside and began to walk, straight toward the narrow path behind the house, the same path that led to the old cemetery behind Ubani Hill. Adiz felt her legs turn to water, but she followed, against Neka's warning, against her fear, against the soft voice in her spirit screaming for her to stop. She wrapped her wrapper tightly around her waist and stepped into the night. The village slept. Crickets screamed from the bushes. Owls hooted from treetops. The moon slid behind clouds, casting long shadows across the earth. Adiz walked barefoot, her feet brushing against cold soil. She kept her distance, following her husband silently, watching his slow, dragging steps, each one as heavy as sorrow. Her heart ached. This was not the man she married. The man she married walked with confidence. He laughed. He joked. He loved life. But this thing ahead of her, was moving like someone whose soul had been abandoned long ago. They walked past the deserted market square, past the stream road, past the bamboo trees, until they reached the foot of Ubani Hill. Adiz gasped softly. He was going exactly where Neka feared. The old cemetery, the one abandoned for decades, the one elders warned children never to approach, the one filled with old graves that carried history and secrets. Chitty climbed the hill slowly, his head tilted down as if listening to voices no one else could hear. Adiz followed, her knees trembling, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. The night air grew colder as they reached the top. The cemetery came into view. Broken tombstones, rotted wooden crosses, uneven mounds of red earth. And in the middle, a shallow grave with no headstone. Just a mound of dark red sand. Chitty walked straight to it. Adiz froze. Her lips parted. Her breath stopped. Her hands flew to her chest. Because written faintly in the sand, as though by weak, dying fingers, was a name she would recognize anywhere. Chitty Okafor. Her husband's name. On a grave. In old red sand. Adiz staggered backwards. No, no, this cannot be. But Chitty walked directly into the grave. Not around it. Not near it. Into it. He knelt on the sand, placed both hands inside it, and lay down inside the depression like someone coming home. Adiz cried out without meaning to. Chitty. He didn't move. Instead, something else happened. The sand around him began to shift, move, crawl, as if the earth itself was welcoming him, hugging him, claiming him. Adiz screamed and ran forward, grabbing his arm. Chitty, get up. Let's go home. Please. His eyes opened. Slowly. Painfully. And for the first time in weeks, she saw him, really saw him. Not the emptiness, not the coldness, not the shadow, but her husband. His voice was faint, shaky, almost like wind slipping through cracks. "Adiz, why did you come?" She sobbed. "I followed you. I didn't know. I didn't know." He looked at her with sad eyes. "I died. Adiz." Her heart shattered. "I was on my way home that evening," he whispered. "A vehicle lost control. It hit me. Before they could help me, I was gone." Adiz fell to her knees. "No. You came home. You spoke to me. You." Chitty shook his head. "I didn't know I was dead. I only knew I needed to return home. I kept coming back. But every morning, I woke up here." He placed a trembling hand on the sand. "This became my home." Adiz sobbed uncontrollably. "But I love you," she choked out. "Come back home with me." Chitty smiled, a small, broken smile. "I can't." The wind blew. The leaves trembled. The cemetery grew colder. "Adiz," he whispered softly. "The living and the dead cannot share the same roof. You've been washing the sand of my grave every day." Adiz shook her head violently. "No, I want you back. I want my husband back." Chitty's eyes glistened with sorrow. "I came back because of love. But love cannot hold me here anymore." He placed his cold hand on hers. "You must let me rest." Adiz cried harder, grabbing his shirt, pulling, begging. "Please don't leave me. I have nobody. Please, Chitty." He cupped her face gently. "You must live. I must rest." Then, the ground beneath him shifted again. The red sand began to cover his legs. Then his waist. Then his chest. Adiz screamed and clung to him desperately. "Chitty." But his voice grew fainter. "Forgive me, my love." The sand rose higher. "Remember me." Higher. "Live well." Higher. "Goodbye." Adiz. Until only his eyes remained. Then they too disappeared under the red earth. The sand flattened itself gently, smooth, like nothing had happened. The grave closed. Silence fell. Adiz sat frozen, staring at the mound of fresh, red earth. Her tears soaked the soil. The sky trembled with distant thunder, and the night swallowed her cries. The next morning, villagers found Adiz sitting motionless on top of the hill. Her wrapper was soaked with dew, her eyes swollen from tears, her hands covered in red sand. She didn't speak for hours. When she finally did, her voice was a whisper carried by the wind. "My husband has gone home." The news spread through the village like harmattan fire. People trembled. Mothers held their children closer. Men whispered in fear. The market women refused to pass the hill for days. Because everyone knew what the elders had always said. The dead may visit, but they always return to where they belong. And Chitty had finally gone back to his true home, the grave that waited for him.